we are going to get started with this month's Bayou Culture Gathering. Today we have with us Jennifer Blanchard, who will be presenting Louisiana Medicinal Plants, Folkways Look Toward the Future. So we're very excited to have Jennifer with us today. The BCC management team is made up of myself, Maida Owens, Dr. Rachel and Dr. Gary, who are with us today. Thankful to be able to work with that group of folks. This is just our slide to let you all know that we're here just to explore some of these ideas. We don't necessarily promote one strategy over the other, but we're just here to have those discussions to see what we can do to continue living here for as long as we can successfully. Here are our partners: the Louisiana Folklore Society, Center for Bayou Studies, Folklore Louisiana, Center for Louisiana Studies, and the Wetlands Discovery Center, Folklife in Louisiana, sorry. And then, of course, our funders who make all of this possible: Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, that's the Division of the Arts, BETNET, we're happy to get support from them, and also the National Endowment for the Arts. Maida couldn't be with us today. She usually talks about the Passing It On workshops. If you're interested in, or if you know someone who would be interested in doing one of these workshops, you can email her. Her email address is there. If you need to get it from one of us, we can get that for you. And this was we wanted to spotlight Mr. Gerald Thibodeau, and he is doing this carding and spinning with Acadian brown cotton. I recently saw there's some scarves and throw blankets at one of the art collectives. I think it might even be in Lafayette, made with some of this cotton that were just absolutely beautiful. So, you know, if you can get the opportunity to get one of those, I'm sure it helps out a lot of the folks who are trying to keep those traditions alive. Here is our agenda for today. We're going to have Ms. Jennifer Blanchard do her presentation. We'll have a little bit of time for questions and answers. After that, we'll ask Jennifer what her hope for the coast is, talk a little bit about our position statement and working group updates, and then we'll ask if any of you have any announcements. And then if you'd like to stick around until 1:30, that's when we have our informal discussion. So we thank all of you for being here with us today to be able to listen to the wonderful presentation by Miss Jennifer Blanchard. And I will hand it over to you, Jennifer. Thanks again for being with us today.
Today I'm going to be speaking with you all, and I'll move that over there so it's out of the way. The Bayou Culture Collaborative about Louisiana medicinal plants. Folkways Look Toward the Future, plants that were used by the Native American tribes in Louisiana. And today, of course, because of who I'm with, I'm focusing on the HOMA. This is a presentation that I created for the new course that I'm teaching this fall in Louisiana medicinal plants. It's the first time that it's being taught at LSU. As part of my work here, I'm an instructor of horticulture in medicinal plants, and I was hired to coordinate a certificate program. And so as part of that work and working on that, you know, when you say medicinal plants, a lot of people think about really one plant, not realizing that there are so many other medicinal plants. And I thought to myself, well, nobody's talking about the native indigenous medicinal plants of Louisiana. And, you know, cannabis is great, it has a purpose, but there are so many other plants. And, you know, I like to give the analogy that if you had a sore throat, you're not going to use cannabis for that, right? So you would use something like slippery elm bark. So I thought, why not create a course on this? And that's what I did. And so today I'll be talking about this presentation on the HOMA that I made for my course. And all of the information in this presentation comes from a paper that was written by Speck in 1941 and published in Primitive Man. And I have given Rachel all kinds of links where she'll be able to share that with you. I gave her a PDF of this presentation and another copy of the PDF with the notes so that you don't have to take notes, you'll have them, okay? So first, I would like to make an acknowledgement to the land in remembrance of our ancestors. And I want to first acknowledge the original inhabitants of this land and my home, Louisiana, land through which the Mississippi River and many other waters flow. This is the land of the Acolapisa, Bayugola, Caddo, Chitimacha, Choctaw, Coshada, Homa, Natchez, and Tunica Biloxi. It's a place known as Bobancha. Native peoples were the first and are the longest inhabitants of this land. They have carried through generations the knowledge of the plants of our prairies, forests, swamps, marshes, beaches, and barrier islands, and its medicine for centuries. This medicine is sacred. This is medicine and sacred wisdom that has healed many and continues to heal to this day. And it is through the strength of this community of people in this special place and their intricate connection to nature on which our culture was built and has been preserved. And for me personally, each day is an honor to be in this spiritual and educational journey. I want to acknowledge all of the ancestors and remember their stories. So this is about me. You can read it later. This is just my credentials. We're not going to get into it. I put it in there so you'd have it. The first thing I have to do is give a medical disclaimer. I am not a medical doctor. This presentation is for education and informational purposes, and I'm not trying to give any replacement of medical advice. You should always consult your physician before starting any type of herbal medicine. Medicinal plants can also be considered poisonous. And they should not be harvested or used without proper knowledge of these plants and the compounds they contain. I'd like to also insert that plants should be harvested in a sustainable manner. And so there are a lot of plants that are of conservation concern, and there are many native plants that you can cultivate at home, and I'll talk about that. So rather than harvesting from the wild, you can cultivate them yourself. And then women who are planning to get pregnant or nursing should consult a physician, because a lot of these plants can contain things that may have adverse reactions to other pharmaceuticals or cause a miscarriage. So this presentation, I'm talking about a lot of different plants. Do not eat plants unless you're 100% sure of their identity. The majority of plants are safe to eat, but some plants and or parts of their plants are toxic and can be fatal. And I've given some examples there. Dr. Allen, who I worked for, he likes to say you can eat anything once, so don't take any chances. If you do your research, it might not kill you. So introduction to medicinal plants. What's a medicinal plant? It's any plant that contains a compound that, or in one of more of its organs, that could be used for therapeutic purposes, or for the precursor of a useful drug. So we use this definition to distinguish medicinal plants that have been established scientifically and those that are still being researched. This goes into an expanded definition. And one thing that I like to point out is like fiber plants, cotton, jute, and flax. They're also medicinal plants because they're used in surgical dressings. Think about a hospital. Without those plants, we wouldn't be able to dress wounds. But actually, there are some liquid bandages. We'll talk about that another time. All right, the evolution of Louisiana plant folkways. So we have the Native American, the first people here, and they basically built all of pharmacology, okay? I mean, not basically, they did. They built all of pharmacology. Everything we know about medicinal plants comes from the indigenous people of the globe. And then we have some French and Spanish influences, like the explorers bringing the world trade of medicinal plants from Spanish America. I've attached a link to that paper here, where they brought plants like copal from South America, which is an incense. And I have here, don't know if you can see them, some white sage and some Palo Santo. And in that paper, they talk about these plants that came from other places and their uses in medicine chests throughout the world. In Europe, they were shipped back to Europe from Spanish American territories here in the Americas. And I have sage and Palo Santo, but in Louisiana, neither one of these plants are native. So the Native Americans here, speaking with Greyhawk Perkins, who is Choctaw, he told me that the people here use cedar, Eastern red cedar. And that was their incense or sacred smoke that they would use, because these two plants that actually do have antibacterial properties when you burn the smoke to cleanse the air. It relieves you of melasma or bad air. So that's, kind of the first part is looking at the Native American use, the French and Spanish influences, and Paige LaPratz, I've attached his paper. He lived with the Natchez for 2 years and recorded information. One thing that I like to point out is in 1921 in Louisiana, they did not allow you to speak foreign language in the schools. You had to conduct all of your lessons in English. And for me, being of French and Spanish heritage, I feel like that was the biggest atrocity of my history in Louisiana because I don't speak French. So if I butcher French names in this presentation, bear with me and forgive me. I've also attached Brasseurs' paper, and it has Charles Bienvenu's thesis on the Cajun traditions and Cajun traiteurs, the Cajun and Creole influence in Louisiana. And then I attached an interview of a Cajun traiteur at the bottom there. So I'm not going to really click on those or go into it because I want to get to the plants. About the native peoples and the use of plant medicine, everything in this presentation comes from a list of the plant curatives that was written by Speck in 1941, and the link is there. I also have a presentation on the Choctaw Bayou Lacombe in St. Tammany Parish, because that's the parish I'm from. So of course my interest was sparked to see that paper. He only lists about 23 plants in that paper, but I have been speaking with people from the Choctaw Nation, and they will be coming. Jason Lewis and Sierra Lagarde will be coming to my class on Monday. And if you would like to come to that class, I will send you an invite. You'll get my email at the end of this talk, and I'll send you an invite to come to class on Monday. And we'll be talking about that, the Choctaw medicine. And there are just a couple overlaps in the HOMA and the Choctaw use of plants from those two documents. Of course, I think that they're much more or an abundance of information about medicinal plants that were used by both of these tribes in Louisiana that's not in that written literature there. And I've attached some other articles on the Choctaw and the Caddo. So here's from my HOMA talk, I kind of rearranged it for this talk of selections of medicinal plants that I think are good for the home and community gardens or for habitat restoration. So I'm going to go through some of these plants now. So the first one is Eupatorium. I used herbarium specimens for my presentation because it makes it easy to see the features of the plant for identification purposes. They're kind of uniform, and you can see each plant, like the margin of the leaf arrangement, the flowers, are they umbels? Are they, trumpets or tubes? So I like to use the herbarium specimens to teach people about these plants. And I'm going to have to follow my notes over here a second. One sec. Let me just grab that so I can see what I want to tell you what it was used for. So this one, they would boil the flowers to make a tea, and they would use it to relieve fever for typhoid. There are different varieties of Eupatorium. Joe Pye weed actually has more of a purple flower. It's a lot taller. And there's also a dwarf version. If you don't want tall plants in the garden, you can get the dwarf version of Joe Pye weed. The French names, I actually sat down with Ashley Michaud-Wilson, or Wilson Michaud, and she is a French speaker and she's a Cajun traiteur, and she helped me to go through the literal translation of the name. So this is head of the woman, tête de femme, and so she's someone to definitely watch, and I have her linked at the end of this presentation. So the next one is Hypericum. And this is the old name that was in there. A lot of this research, I have to go through synonyms and figuring out what the plant is. So I have that identified. And this one is St. Andrew's Cross. It's used in the paper. They boil the flowers to make a tea to be drunk. Oh, maybe that's the Joe Pye weed. I'm sorry. That's the notes for Joe Pye weed. I don't know why that happened. Okay, so this one, the bark and root was scraped and they made a tea, and it was for fever. But it is used today as an antidepressant drug from the flowers. So it's has, you know, a lot of these plants have, you would call them a panacea, like they have multiple uses, right? So you really have to do your research and understand which parts of the plants, because like this one, the flowers you would use, but in other plants you might use the roots or the bark or the tubers or something like that. So just learning about the different plants. The next plant that we're going to talk about is a Panexifolium. It's ginseng. It's an American ginseng. It's protected and you do not want to wild harvest this plant, but if you can get seeds or plants, it is a plant that needs to be planted. It needs to be, you know, restored within the forest. It was used, the roots, and they say was used as an infusion to stop vomiting. And they would also make an infusion with whiskey to abate rheumatism. The next plant that we have is a Solidago or Goldenrod. You probably know it by that name. And this one is Nemeralis. There are lots of varieties of goldenrods and they all have pretty much similar properties. But this one, they would boil a handful of the roots to make a tea that was drunk for yellow jaundice. But most people use the goldenrod for like fevers and colds, things like that, you know, or flu and cold treatment. The next plant that I have is one of my favorites. Probably, I have too many favorites, but this is one of my favorites. This is the Passiflora incarnata, or the purple passion flower. I actually have a tincture here that I use. I get this at like Whole Foods, right? No, that's not a plug for Whole Foods, but it is it's a nervine. So I actually just did some analysis of the plant parts, the vines and tendrils versus the leaf versus the flower versus the fruit. And the leaves actually contained the most of the compound, the highest amount of the compound, that it is anti-anxiety and it can be sedative. So you have to, you know, gauge. And again, I'm not giving any medical advice or telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I do and how I use these plants, my experience with them. And I want to say that when it comes to passion flower or any other medicinal plant, you know, you can't be on other substances when you are engaging in herbal medicine, because then how could you tell how it makes you feel, you know? So keep that in mind if you do start to go into herbalism or medicinal plant research, you know, and you're trying things, like don't mix things, because then you can't really tell what's happening with your body. The next one that I'll talk about, well, let me just say about passion flower, there's a whole Christian faith association to this plant, the different parts of the plant, the color and all that, and I have that attached in the notes. And it's just interesting. You know, a lot of my work with medicinal plants, you go into with the Cajun traiteurs, a mix of Catholicism with the Native American, the connection, you know, the spiritual connection to nature and all of the animal medicine, right? Like in some of the Amazonian stuff that I look at, you know, you have the jaguar medicine, hummingbird medicine, you know, things like that. So there's a lot of spirituality that goes into this. And also with research, you'll see like there's some mind and matter things going on. It's, you know, does it heal you because you think it's healing you, or is it really healing you, right? Well, I can tell you pine pitch on my leg healed a wound. So I think it's really healing me. Maybe it's a little bit of my believing it, but I'm going to try to move along here. So the next plant that I have is Bignonia cabriolata. It's crossvine. Some people call it trumpet vine, but don't confuse it with trumpet vine, which is Campsis radicans. Which is also another native medicinal plant of Louisiana. It's not one of the homa plants that are listed in the paper, but probably was used. And this plant is right here, the yellow and red flowers is the crossvine. It's called crossvine or Lane a la Croix, excuse me, because if you cut the vine at a dissection, you get a cross like this. So that will help you to identify it. If you cut through the vine and you see that cross, it's crossvine probably. The leaves, also the flowers and fruits will help you to identify the plant. It was used, they crushed the roots and put it in drinking water, but did not boil it for a blood tonic, like a blood purifier. You know, there's a lot of that in here too. And remember, this is all like historical use before we had technology to really analyze these things and see if they were dangerous, right? So the next one is sarsaparilla. This one's a black sarsaparilla and sarsaparilla noir. This one is, let's see, was the tea was made as a blood clarifier, another one, right? You get that a lot. So the next one that I think that, and I put some of these vines in here that maybe aren't as attractive. They do have spines or thorns, but I just think that it is something that if you have it in your yard, leave it alone, leave it there. It's native, it's good. You know, get rid of the invasive things. The next thing is the cane, arundinaria, and that synonym is gigantea. You probably know it as that name, giant cane, and it was used as a basket making material. And they also used the roots to make an infusion, and that was to renew strength or stimulate kidneys. You know, so it was a medicine as well. The next one I have for you is the palmetto, Sable Miner, and that one was used, the roots, small roots were taken and crushed, and the juice was rubbed into the eyes to relieve soreness. And there's more information about it. I'm not going to give you everything. It's in the notes and you guys can look at that later at your leisure. I just want to kind of get through some of these, and I'm probably running out of time already. The next one is Typha Latifolia. This is a cattail. The cattail is medicinal. The stalks were boiled to make a tea for whooping cough by the Homa, according to the paper. And I think for like bioswales, it's a good plant, right? Like put some cattails in your bioswale, and places where you have a depression in your yard, maybe there's a lot of water that gathers there, put irises, which are not in this paper, but they are medicinal. Irises, cattails, you know, any kind of like wet plant that you can think of or you see if you go along the edges of ponds, you know, like Pondoterra cordata comes to mind. You know, those plants are great bioswale, rainwater, stormwater catching plants. The next one that I have for you, it's actually a bromeliad. It's a Spanish moss, and usually associated with oak trees, you'll see the Spanish moss. It's a family member to the pineapple family. It's an epiphyte, it gets all of its nutrients from the air. And as a medicinal plant, used by the Homa, also like used to in colonial times to fill mattresses. I'm trying to click on it. Here we go. They would take and make a tea to relieve chills and fever. The next plant that I have for you, this is an andropogon or broom grass. That's probably what you would know it as. And the broom grass, they would make a tea and they would give it as a cold drink to pregnant women to strengthen the mother and the baby. But I put some grasses in here because grasses, a lot of people don't think about these grasses, but they're pretty and they can be ornamental in the yard, you know. So something to think about. The other grass that I have is ratgrass or scirpus. And this plant was used by the Homa to make a tea, and they would give it to nervous or fretful children who were crying. And they would also bathe in it, and that would be to wash and also for weak legs, and then make brooms from it. I would think you'd use broom grass, but that's what it says in my notes. So there you go. And then this one is hackberry. The hackberry was used by the Homa. The bark would be brewed as a drink for sore throat. So that's what they used it for. I put in this presentation, I separated like herbs and then vines and then grasses, kind of the other plants that are mixed in there, like the Spanish moss, and then trees. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of trees real quick. So this is the hackberry, and then the next one that we have is the dogwood, which I think dogwoods are really beautiful trees. We have a couple different species in Louisiana. This one is Cornus florida. It used to be, or no, actually it's Fomina now. Sorry, they changed the name. These botanists, you know, most of them, they change the names, and with genetics and everything, it changes constantly. So it's hard to keep up if you don't really pay attention. Let's see. I said that this plant, the nearest location that I could find in the atlas was in Jefferson Parish, but maybe it is in that region of Homa. But you know, the Native Americans, they would move through different areas and trade and things like that too. So it could have been. And let's see, they said that they would use scrapings of the roots or bark, would boil it, and then it would be used for fever and malaria. The next plant that we have is the alligator tree. And a tea was made from the roots and bark of the trees that roots were growing in water, so near the water's edge. And I'm not really familiar with this tree, so I can't say much about it, but I think it might be attractive in your lawn. Then there's black walnut. I think most people are probably familiar with that one. And the black walnut, they would use the shells of the walnut, and it would be a bath that they would create to cure itch. And here you can see with this plant, like it has a compound leaf. So these are leaflets. That's another botanical identification that you can use to identify different plant species, is whether it has a simple leaf or a compound leaf, and these have a compound leaf with several leaflets. And usually, you know, in the research or in the identification, it'll tell you how many leaflets the plant has. So that'll help you to identify that tree. This one you guys probably are familiar with. It was the first chewing gum. This is liquid amber, styrus fluor, sweet gum. Hori, you're familiar with it because you stepped on the fruits, right? You stepped on the seeds, and they're kind of pokey and not fun when you're a barefoot little girl running through the swamp, right? So the roots were boiled down to make a tea and applied externally, and they said caused by small worms in the skin. Now this is all ancestral literature, you know, it's really old. I don't know what they're referring to as far as those worms, but you know, I have more research to do. It also is the copal. Okay, so this, they use the word copal for the resin. Copal means the resin. It's talking about an incense plant. And that name came from, you know, Mesoamerica, Spanish America. And I don't know if I have anything else to say about that right now, but it's a good tree. So if it's in your yard, leave it alone or plant more. This is the mistletoe. It's actually a parasite on trees. It does have medicinal properties. The mistletoe, the plant was boiled and drunk to relieve debility and weakness, but also this plant does have toxicity. It can cause a spontaneous miscarriage. So please know that, and know that it does have toxicity. But look up in the wintertime, and if you see the mistletoe, it'll be like a bushy little green ball in the tops of the trees that have no leaves. So that's, you'll see it in winter. And my dad is from the country, and he used to shoot it out of the tree to get the Christmas mistletoe. Well, I don't know if that's such a great thing, Rachel. I see you thumbs up and down there. But no, so you will see it, and I look for it because it is an indicator of air quality. If you don't see the mistletoe, your air quality is not that good. So the next one that I have for you is a Magnolia virginiana, sweet bay magnolia. And we have several species of magnolia in Louisiana. Some are native, some are non-native. We have the Japanese, which is non-native, but it's a beautiful tree. And we have a banana magnolia, which I love because it does smell like bananas, but it's not native. This is a native, and also the Magnolia grandiflora is a native and was used as plant medicine by the Choctaw in the paper that I have. I'm sure it was probably used by the Homa as well. So this one, it says about the Magnolia virginiana that they would make a tea to warm the blood and cure chills and colds, things like that. the part of the plant that they used was the leaves and twigs. Sorry. The next one is, you're probably familiar with this, the wax myrtle, right? Bayberry. People know that. Myrica. It used to be Morella, now it's Myrica cerifera. And this plant, they would use this plant as boiling the leaves as a vermifuge. So to get rid of, like, you know, worms and parasites, things like that. They also would use the wax and coat string for blowguns and things like that, and candle making. And I hopefully will be able to teach my students about that this semester. The next plant that I have is Nyssa sylvatica. We have Nyssa sylvatica and Nyssa aquatica, a couple different species in the state. This one was used by the Homa for a drink. The roots and bark were made into a drink for worms as a wormer. So that's that one. And you'll notice that with this plant, the branches come off at a 90-degree angle. That's how Dr. Allen taught me to remember it. It's called gomme de plaquemine, but plaquemine actually means persimmon. So I kind of was like, is this really this plant or a different plant? I'm not sure. And I don't want to run out of time. So one of you, if I start to run out of time, need to give me some heads up, because I'm trying to fly through these. All right, we have a bunch of oaks coming up. So we have Quercus alba, which is the white oak. And they would use the oaks, the acorns and things as food as well. This one, they said that they would use it for treating rheumatism. And that was the roots that they used of this plant. The next one that I have is the red oak, I think, or yeah, red oak. It's Quercus texana. And that plant was used, the bark was boiled and it was used as a drink. It says as a tonic, general tonic, and for sore throat and hoarseness. The next oak that we have is the live oak, and that is Quercus virginiana. All of the oaks are in the genus Quercus, so that's easy to remember, right? And this one, the bark was boiled and used as a drink to treat dysentery, which is like really bad diarrhea and almost deadly, or could be deadly, right? Was deadly for a lot of people in the early times here in this place. The next one is the resurrection fern, and I put that there because you usually see resurrection fern in oak trees, live oaks. And this plant, it looks like it's dead until it rains. I'm sure they all look dead right now, but the next time it rains, go look up in your oak tree and they're going to be alive again. And that's where it comes from, like the resurrection of Christ, the coming back to life. And that one, I don't know. I don't have the, they had it in the paper, but they didn't say that how they used it. So I don't have a usage for you on that one. Then we have Salix, which was the first aspirin. Okay. The bark was used. The roots and the barks were made to treat feebleness or thinness of blood. But if you, it contains salicylic acid. One of the first aspirins that we had came from willow bark. It's also a great root tone too, just so you know. Sambuca canadensis, one of my favorites, and what I keep telling everybody for COVID, okay? Elderberry, 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 and slippery elm bark if you have a sore throat, okay? The elderberry is for the congestion and the bronchitis, right? And it's the elderberry syrups, or you can get lozenges. They have it available commercially. This elderberry here, they would use the, they would only gather them on June 24th, which I think is the summer solstice, right? And the bark was boiled down to make a liquid to apply for swelling and pain. And then a tonic wine was made from the berries. And they also used the hollow bark as blowguns. The next plant I have, one of my other favorites, is sassafras. And sassafras, you know it as filet or root beer, right? It used to be a root beer, but it contains a carcinogen in the roots, safrole. And so we no longer make root beer from the roots of the sassafras, but they still make the filet because the leaves do not contain the safrole. They make the filet for your gumbo. But speaking to that, ethnobotany of African Americans in the slave trade in Louisiana, I have a talk on that coming up. And that is Gumbo is the African word for okra. Okra is also a medicinal plant. And so I'll also talk to my students about culinary medicine and how your food is medicine. The sassafras here, they use it as a poultice for wound healing. Then we have the cypress. And the cypress, they would use the knee. I thought that was interesting, right? Like they would scrape the knee, mix it with whiskey. That was one of their additives that they used to administer medicine, probably because it would help with whatever pain you had, right? But used it to purify the blood. And then we have the Ulmus americana. Now I talked about Ulmus rubra, which is the slippery elm bark. This is the American elm. And they would use the bark mixed with red oak for dysentery treatment. Okay, the next one. Oh, I'm getting close to the end of this list. This is going to be prickly ash or Xanthosxylum clava hercules. And it's the toothache tree. It has a natural novocaine. And the use of the homa, they would make a pulp of the grated roots and bark, apply it to aching teeth. But I mean, sometimes you can just get the leaf and your whole mouth goes numb. It's crazy. There's also a toothache grass in Louisiana, but that wasn't in this paper. So then I listed, I did include in my presentation for you all of the weedy plants that are in the paper and their uses and all of that. But I'm really gonna fly through that because I want to get to the end of the presentation where we can talk about kind of like restoration and things like that. So I put it in there so you'd have access to it, all of that information, but we're not going to plant a bunch of weedy plants in our garden. But if you see them in an empty lot, leave them alone. They're great. They're perfect. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to a slide real quick. Sorry I hope it's not strobing anybody, but just going to jump go back. I want to go back to this. So here I have the picture from the beginning of my talk, which is a Homo woman. And she's like looking off, and I feel like she's looking at the future and she's thinking very hard about something. I wish I could get inside her brain, right? And that her name is Verdane. And then also there's Monique Verdin, who is the founder of the Land Memory Bank and Seed Exchange. And I gave Monique seeds years and years ago that I had collected from all my different nature walks. And I think that's a good thing to think about, like as a community, at a community level, sharing seeds is a great way to like spread the wealth, right? So here I have Hibiscus moschutos, which is not in my presentation, but is a medicinal plant of Louisiana. And, you know, I'll be happy to share seeds. These came from a garden I have planted here on campus at the Hill Farm. So, you know, seed sharing, that's a great community activity to help keep these plants around. Then Tammy Greer, she has a medicinal plant or medicine wheel garden, but it's also like considered a medicine wheel forest because the trees have grown really tall there on USM's campus. I'm actually an alumni of USM. I got my degree in environmental biology there. And I met Tammy years ago, probably at the Los Isleños Festival, but then with Dr. Allen, of course, you know, reconnecting with her. I've been to the garden there a couple times, talked to her. Also, she's helped me to connect with Jason Lewis of the Choctaw Nation. I am trying to connect with someone from the Homa tribe. So if you are a member of the Homa Nation, please, I would love to connect with you and work on building my class out and building out more talks. And, you know, there aren't a lot of classes on, and really I've only found one at LSU on Native Americans. And I would like to change that, you know, and I need help to do that. The only way that we're going to do this is through community collaboration, working together and bringing this information to people. And I know that Native American medicine, some is very sacred and protected, but these things that I'm sharing with my students are available on the internet. They're already out there. And I feel like it's good information. It helps by having these collaborations, giving this information to young people. It makes a more sustainable and resilient Louisiana. I know we don't like the word resilient because we've been forced into resilience, but I think it's a good thing for us to have that sustainability and know the knowledge of these plants. And then Ashley Wilson, she's a French speaker, Cajun traiteur, I told you. And I have all their links there. So when you get the presentation, you can just click on those and talk to those people or connect with them. So I still had some mysteries left to be solved, and Ashley tried to help me solve them. But in the paper, he said there are some duplicates, like, you know, these common names. That's why I'm like, don't use common names, because, you know, a June bug in Louisiana might be a totally different bug in Minnesota, right? I don't know, you know, that's my example. But like chicory here, there's 2 chicories and they're both European in origin. The snake grasses, really a snake grass is any grass that looks like a snake, right? So you got to be real careful, and that's mostly vines, right? Linnaeus or lianas, that's what they call them. So in the hog grasses, there were a couple of those. So always, this is why positive identification and chemical analysis is necessary to learn about these plants and really make sure we have their identification correct and what they're used for correct before we start to engage in this. And then these were the mystery plants. So that's in your presentation for you later. I'm skipping through. So how to identify plants? I worked with Dr. Allen. I'm not pushing Dr. Allen's books, okay, but those are the books I use every day. I mean, they're literally right behind me because that's what I do. You know, I use those the atlases there to find the locations of the plant, because in each one of these, there's a map that shows exactly where those plants were found in the state. And we have 64 parishes. And there are plants in here where they only have 1 dot. And that concerns me. So, you know, I look at that and collect that information on location. I have another book that I didn't put in the presentation, but I want to show you. So don't mind me while I struggle. This is the Ethnobotany of Native Americans. And it's a good book. Talks about all the different tribal uses of medicines, plant medicines. And then I also have another book that's not in my presentation that I like to recommend because it has the chemical constituents. Can you see it? It doesn't. Medicinal Plants of the World. There you go. And yeah, it's kind of beat up. The blue is non-native and the green is native. Okay, don't judge me for my use of Post-it notes. It helps me, all right? It's a lot of work being done over here. I'm always like, if your desk is clean, you're not doing anything, all right? So don't judge Jen Blanchard. She's doing a lot of work. And then the leaf key from LSU Ag Center is right here, and there's a link to that. It's a helpful identification tool of common trees. Now, folkways looking towards the future. You guys, am I talking too much? Do I need to shut up? Okay, I'm trying to get through it. I got 100 slides.
I think everybody's really enjoying what you have to say, so please keep going.
So here you see this map, and I say in my notes that I think this map is a little out of date, needs to be updated. It's from like 2007, 2008, but you know, we're facing a lot of things. We've got climate change, we've got hurricanes. I don't want to, you know, we all know what we've got, but I'm going to go over it. Extreme weather. So we've either got drought or deluge, right, in Louisiana. Sea level rise, anthropogenic alteration of the natural environment, and natural hydrology has been altered by humans through the, you know, the exploration here. Erosion, saltwater intrusion, and you know, I could go into all of it. I could do a talk on each one of those, but I'm not going to do that right now. But we're facing coastal retreat and northern migration, habitat loss, vegetation shifts, and some extinctions. So, you know, when looking at what can we do, I'm like, do what you can with what you know. Create microhabitats, medicinal gardens, pollinator habitats. I have 130 something plus medicinal plants in Louisiana, and I know all of their pollination modes pretty much. I've researched that and I have it in a sheet. And there's so many, like the passion flower, Gulf fritillaries, that's where they lay their eggs. That's where their caterpillars. So by planting that medicinal plant, you also provide habitat for, and crucial habitat. I always say when it comes to butterfly gardens, people talk about butterfly gardens, they plant a bunch of nectar plants, but you didn't plant the host plant that they need to lay their eggs. You got to do a life cycle butterfly garden where you're supporting the full life cycle of the insect, you know. So and be aware of that too. If you see a red caterpillar with black spikes on your passion flower, don't kill it. That's the Gulf fritillary caterpillar. We want those butterflies. They, you know, I think it's 1 in 3 bites of food are from a pollinated plant, so people don't think about it, but you got to really realize that without these insects, we have no food. And I like to eat, Louisiana. We don't eat to live. We live to eat in this state. And that's what I do. So I definitely want to protect my pollinators. I used to work with the Pollinator Partnership. So I say, create these medicinal gardens, bioswales, rain gardens. Oh, we got to get rid of, like, the neutral ground needs to have a curb cut and a bioswale, so it takes on that water, so it's not on the road. Okay, when you have parking lots, we need permeable parking lots. Okay, and I'll show you a little bit about that. And then collaborate, reshape spaces, live in the present, collaborate, create community, learn, explore, carry, and share knowledge, create equitable, sustainable, resilient spaces in our community along the coast of Louisiana. That's what we have to do. And so I say, strengthen the community by joining the collaborative. There are state programs, and I've linked all of those there. And I think that everybody should become familiar with their Sea Grant extension agents and specialists, and stay tuned to like what events they have as far as restoration where you can volunteer and help out. I think that's a good thing to do. And so I've listed all of those people and their territories there. And then reshaping spaces. I told Jonathan and Sarah and Rachel yesterday about, there's this skate park in Houma, right? And you see it's got this, oh, I'm not even there. I'm not even on that slide. I wasn't transforming, sorry. Well, here we go. Okay, so strengthen your community. There's your links. There's your links to your Sea Grant people. And then reshaping spaces. There's this giant skate park, right? Giant parking lot at the skate park. Look at all this space out here where there's all this grass. Can we plant some trees there? I'll come plant trees. Just let me know, can we get some trees? Can we start to grow some trees? Maybe put a nursery there where we can grow some restoration trees and then kind of add to that space, maybe plant some more flowers, some of these things. This garden that you see is behind my building. It was put in by Eric I don't want to say the wrong last name, Eric, who is a landscape architecture student, and Taylor Williams and a group of students from that department, the School of Design here at LSU. They put it in behind Wilson Lab right here. And you can see that's a medicinal plant garden. It's a pollinator garden. It's a micro prairie. It's a micro habitat, and it's gorgeous. And it's the only space like it on this campus other than the medicinal plant garden I have at the Hill Farm. You could do that here. You could get rid of some of this parking lot, put in some bioswales, maybe permeable instead of having all that concrete. I don't know. Obviously I don't own the property. I can't do it, right? But you might be able to do it, and I might be able to come help. That could be a project to like reshape this space and make it more colorful and more attractive, and provide these little micro habitats. And I talk about different types of stormwater management on that slide as well for you. And then these are my references that I use. You'll have this when you get the presentation, and I'm now at the question slide. I hope I didn't talk too long. I think I did.
No, it was great. We really appreciate
these plants are not in this presentation, but they are all medicinal native plants of Louisiana, and they're all my photos that I've taken when I was working out in Fort Polk with Dr. Allen many moons ago. So yeah, long time ago, 2008, 2007. 2008, 2009. So yeah, and my contact is there, and you'll have that as well. So any questions for me? Do I need to find the chat?
No, it's okay. So Gary, if you have questions, if you can virtually raise your hand like Gary just did, so we can acknowledge you. So yeah, Gary.
Thanks for that awesome talk. I guess one thing that I feel like is worth saying is I appreciate you helping us preserve, these traditions, and the BCC is full of this. And some of what we've lived through in the past, kind of as a culture, with a lot of the stuff that you were saying, is there used to be connected with this topic, kind of fear and prejudice against traiteurs or folk healers. You would maybe sometimes call them witches. And we've gotten over the hump to where we are ready to admire and preserve and revere these traditions. To me, that's very important. And I'm glad you're doing that for students. So thanks for that. And if I had a question, it would be, if there was one, easiest place for us to see a medicinal garden? It sounded like you talked about a few of them.
You could go,
A public one that we could all go to. Which one would that be?
Vermilionville has a small one. I would go there. It's, I mean, I say small, it's around a cottage. So that's in Lafayette. So that's kind of the closest thing to you. But they also have one at City Park in New Orleans. They have a little herbal garden or medicinal garden. I have a small space here at the Hill Farm. Like I said, Tammy has hers in Hattiesburg. And you know, I want to say something because you mentioned the traiteurs. There's a book that was written by Wanda Fontenot, and it's called Secret Doctors, and it's about the African American community and the healers in the African American community. And you know, the Cajun traiteurs and the African Americans, a lot of that healing was based on the Native American plants and their use. But there was a lot of mixing of cultures and people, you know, because think about it, you're in a rural community, you're far away from a hospital, you have to have people in the community that heal. And, you know, with the African American community, there were inequities, there was, you know, racism, segregation. So they would rely on their own people in the community to heal the community. So I think that book is another good book to read about this tradition of healing within our community. And the Cajun traiteurs, you know, I've given you some presentations on those that you can look at to learn a little more about that. And I am trying to connect with more traiteurs. I've connected with Ashley, but definitely if you know anyone around, I would love to speak with them further. So any other questions?
Yeah, so we'll
Let's
take
see.
one more question. David, I see that you have your hand raised. And if you do have other questions, and we're just trying to be mindful of time, but we do encourage you to stick around until 1:30 if you have the time where we can continue the discussion. But David, your question, please.
Well, it's in the chat, I put a PDF of the brochure.
You put a PDF.
Sorry about that. I was unmuted. Okay. Yeah, in the chat, I put the PDF of the brochure that's associated with the Healer's Garden in Vermilionville. We put that out when I was there several years ago, and I did the. Well, actually, I translated it to English because it was actually the names of the plants were from French because Dr. Bienvenu's thesis was not a botanist a botany thesis. It was linguistics. So the idea was that he had people. Black Creoles in St. Martin Parish, just to talk. And he said, well, you just can't, you know, put a microphone and say, just talk. You know, he said, well, tell me about something. So they just started talking about plants. And Dr. Ray Brasso, I think, is on this call. Could talk a lot more about that than I can because he was very instrumental in that. And then they realized we not only have this linguistic heritage, but we have all this, the plant knowledge now too. So that's how that whole project developed. So yes, I have somewhere in the chat, you'll see that. And somebody also mentioned Mary Perrin's book that she just co-wrote with, I forget her friend right now, but you can get, I just came out in the last 3-4 months about traditional hearing. Mary's a traiter also. So yeah, so thank you very much. This is all great information and we need to talk more about that. And just one last thing, those copal, the little balls, I put in the chat too. My dad used to play golf down at Tidelands in Galliana. And he used to he used to have to hold his tees, his golf tees, stick them in the hole and you walk around with that. So that's a very useful plant for a lot of things.
Yeah, we all have those connections, right? Those memories. My students, I took them the other day downstairs to see American Beautyberry, another, you know, I call it French mulberry because that's what my mama called it, was French mulberry. And that plant for me, when I crush the leaves or I smell the berries and crush them, I just go back to that place in Pearl River, the cattle guard, the White House, the farm. You know, I'm right there because I smell that and I go to that place. And a lot of plants can be identified by their smell as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like Dr. Allen says, plukia makes you want to pukia, stinking camphor weed, right? So I think that we all have those connections to plants, like you said about the sweet gum with your dad. I think that's great. You know, that's your memory, that's your connection.
Real quick, we did have Ms. Toops with her hand up earlier, and I see she's put her hand back. So if you can answer your question real quick.
Yeah, I put it in chat. I've been looking for Vinedad or Vunedad as it's mentioned in the DLF. And I've talked to Native American healers, and nobody can tell me where to find the plant. It's just disappeared. And I thought maybe Jennifer might know.
Well, Tell me,
I-
tell me the English name for it. Which one I'm trying to find it.
Well, the English name, Atretas told me that she had heard it called rabbit tobacco or
yeah.
life everlasting.
Yeah, that's
I know where you can find that. Jen,
Anaphyllum. Yeah.
when I met Jen, she was at Ashley Wilson's workshop, and Ashley, who lives around Arnaudville in the Prairie des Femmes, has a ton of this plant on her property. This is a plant that she's been working with a lot, like the Venere.
Yeah, we get her email, the emails from the Arnaudville thing. I'll have to look into that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ask Ashley. She'll be able to share some with you. She has tons of them around her property that she's been looking after and gathering and drying. So she's got it ready to go.
Messy.
Yeah. And Ashley is really like great. She says, you know, she smells the plants to identify them, and that she feels very connected to the plants, like they talk to her. You know, I feel the same way, you know, when I'm in the forest, that I have like these things around me pushing me, you know, all the time. So
Jennifer, one of the things that we like to ask our presenters is, what's your hope for the coast? Where do you find the hope for the coast?
Well, you know, I think that there's a huge investment in our coast right now. And I think that we are trying to come up with creative ways of protecting our coast and protecting our communities. And I think, you know, my hope is things like this, you know, being able to have this opportunity to bring this information to people and share it and learn from each other and have community. I work with the Herb Society of America Baton Rouge unit, and I was telling them, like, community dinners, that's a great way, like everybody bring a dish, everybody get together, and let's talk about, you know, this project that's coming up that we want to do, maybe, you know, to reshape a space or whatever. And I think like that's my hope, is that, you know, people will remember that everything starts with that connection in the community. And I said this yesterday, you know, look at Hawaii and what's going on there with the fires. You know, the community is what's going to save that place and keep that place and hold on to that land. And that's what we have to do, you know, here. And I've always been a champion for Louisiana and our communities and trying to protect our communities. So I think that's my hope, is that we just get stronger as a community and do more of these things where we come together and talk about our problems or the things that we want to do, you know, focus on the future, focus on these little projects that we can do, you know, to make a nice place for our future generations, you know, and to keep this medicine and this knowledge continuing after we're gone, you know, create a legacy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's going to be one that I go back to, because these will be posted on the YouTube channel. And this is something I want to watch again, just to make sure that I get that information again. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you to Rachel for inviting me, and thank you all for having me too. You know, it really was a great opportunity. I know I talk a lot and really fast, so it's good.
You've got great information, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, and you're so excited about it. I would love to take your course. If you're one of the, I can tell it would be so much fun to be in a course with you.
Likewise. So we're at 1 o'clock right now, so we're gonna go through these next slides fairly quickly, but we hope that you'll stick around with us until 1:30 for the informal sharing portion of today. So this is information on our position statement. You can use those QR codes there to sign up as an individual or as an organization. Here's a little bit of information on the working groups. I think, do we have anyone from the French group who would like to speak on what's happening? Either David or Rachel, do you want to give us a quick update?
Oh, yeah, it's going along. We're still planning on our meeting for October the 7th at the West Baton Rouge Museum. We're working on the invitation list and our little invitation letter. We have a little subcommittee, I guess you could say, of the subcommittee working on the wording of the letter and the invitation, all of that should be going out shortly. Yeah, we're all, everything's coming together. Rachel was able to get us some funding. So that's always good. We need a little bit of money to do something, even though we're all volunteers, we still gotta find some money somewhere to do stuff. So that's always good. So Rachel, if there's anything, si t'as quelque chose à dire, on sait, ouais.
No, rien à ajouter à l'instant. I think basically it's still coming together, but I think everything's developing. So we're getting everything together for the summit on October the 7th. That's a Saturday, the West Baton Rouge Museum. So, and it's open. So we're going to have an invitation list. So please contact, David, if you're interested in that, or if you're interested in joining our gatherings. We also do our working group gatherings over Zoom. So just like the Bayou Culture Collaborative groups, you can stay wherever you are in Louisiana or outside of Louisiana, and you can join the discussion on how to take actionable steps to promote French.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Sarah, would you like to do the other updates for the other working groups?
Yeah, so and I just dropped another link in the chat. We have our Culture and Coastal Planning Working Group. They are actually polling for a new time to meet, and they are looking for a co-convener. So that's going to be Theo Hilton. He is the main convener. He's looking for a little bit of help. So if you're interested in either joining that group or being a co-convener, they are looking for that. They are currently focusing on cemeteries and cultural landscapes. And in the chat, you can see there's a when to meet link. So if you're a part of that group and you want to take the poll and when you are available, he is looking for a new meeting time. Jonathan, can you go to the next slide, please?
It's the next one.
Okay. So then preparing for receiving communities, they are meeting on Thursday, September 21st at 11. And so that'll actually be the day before our next gathering on the 22nd. So that's going to be Haley and Tracy are our co-conveners, and our Artists and Tradition Bearers group. Let me put that in the chat for you guys. Artists and Tradition Bearers actually are changing their time to Wednesday. They were a different day of the week. It's going to work better for a lot of their members. So that's Wednesday, September 20th at 6. And that's Lola Himmerd, who is the convener for that group. Next slide, please, Jonathan. Okay. And so these are just the contact information for all of those working groups. And I'm putting another, if you notice for preparing receiving communities, if you go to the chat, you click on the constant contact link, that is how you can get in touch with that group. And so this is how to get in touch with them. And if we go one more slide.
Yep.
We actually have a new working group that will be convening. And Pud, I think you're on this call. Do you want to say anything about this?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, there was a kind of a hole in one of the things that I'm involved in, archival work. And so they asked if I could be a convener. And I've been having a side conversation with somebody in this group about being a co-convener as well in the last couple of minutes. The Protecting Collections group will be a working group concerned with identifying and addressing issues facing archives, libraries, and museums, both public and private, in the coastal zone due to issues related to climate change. So we have quite a bit of space to cover there, and we can go in whichever directions we choose to go in together. And I see that there can be some overlap in the things that we all do. So we'll pull Jonathan in to talk this and that as well. And I hope some of you guys are interested in the group and will join for our meeting, which will be September 20th.
Thank you so much for that, Bud.
No problem. I'll pull you in everywhere, Jonathan.
happy to be a part of it.
So you could email collectionsbcc@gmail.com or sign up using that constant contact link in the chat. And that's all we have for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. We hope that you will all join us for next month's gathering where we will have Mr. David Cheremy talk to us about Louisiana French in the 21st century. an old language and new media. So we hope that you'll join us for that. Instead of doing announcements now, if you have something to share with us, if you just stick around for the informal part of this session, we will be glad to listen to those announcements. And then we also want to share with you that there's a workshop that Maida is going to be doing, climate migration and welcoming newcomers. That's going to be at the Louisiana Arts Summit on Thursday, September 28th at 1. So if you're able to be there, we would love to see you there. And then part 2 is in person at the Art Summit on Thursday, November 5th at 2:45. So that concludes the formal part of this presentation.